your submission, I'd just like to swing the camera across to the, in the back of the room. Today we received a petition from Accessibility Matters, and they have given us a mouth and teeth in order, in balloon art, in order to give this legislation some more teeth. And I told them that I would bring it into the room, so I'm just honouring that. Thank you. Now, I see that we have John and Sarah here. John and Sarah, would you like a description of the members in the room? Yes, please. Okay, so I'm Angie Warren-Clark. I'm the chair, sitting right in the centre of the room. I am wearing a dark but
beautiful and floral.
Dark but floral dress. I have long blonde hair. I have glasses, and that's probably a very bad posture, probably, by the end of this day. So thank you. Move on to Anahila.
Kia ora, I'm Anahila. I'm Labour MP based in Papakura. I am wearing an afro shell necklace and I'm wearing black.
I'm Liz Craig, Labour List MP based in Invercargill. I've got blonde curly hair and wearing a navy jacket and dress.
Kia ora kōrua. I'm Emily Henderson. I'm the MP for Whangare. I'm wearing a blue dress. I have short, spiky, grey blonde hair and big glasses, and I'm Pākehā.
Kia ora kōrua, talofa. My name is Teresa Ingobi. I am the Labour MP for the Otaki electorate, just down the road. I am Samoan Scottish heritage. I have brown skin. I've got long brown hair. I'm probably a little bit overweight. Just on the side here.
Kia ora koutou, Jan Logie, Green Party MP. I'm closest to you on the table. I've got grey hair, but it's partially dyed blonde and spiky. And I'm wearing dark colours, and I'm very, very Scottish ancested and pale.
I'm Karen Chua. I'm a list member for the ACT Party. I have long dark hair. I'm wearing a pink jacket and a light floral top underneath, and I'm Māori European.
And on the Zoom, we have Maureen Pugh. Maureen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Of course, and welcome John and Sarah. My name is Maureen Pugh. I'm based in West Coast Tasman, a national MP, and I'm today wearing a peachy coloured top, and I have short dark brown hair and wearing glasses. Lovely to have you here.
So with that description, we have 15 minutes with you. Please don't worry. We are running late, but we are giving you the full time, 15 minutes. Would you like, if you'd like to leave some time for questions, please do so. If you'd like, I can let you know at 10 minutes or at some point whether we've all got hands up, etc., to ask you questions. So with that, welcome, and we are completely in your hands.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure and the opportunity to be here to speak to the Select Committee today. I first want to acknowledge you taking the time to describe the room, particularly for Sarah. And I think that speaks very well in terms of your recognition, the importance of recognizing a disability. I also want to acknowledge in the audience Fletcher Tabato, who's here providing support to Blind Low Vision NZ and Access Matters Aotearoa. My name is John Mulka. I'm the Chief Executive of Blind Low Vision NZ and also a member of the Access Matters Aotearoa group. You're going to hear from my colleague Sarah Mitchell shortly as part of the presentation, and we would welcome a notification at the 10-minute mark, just so we leave enough time for any questions. So for those of you who may not be aware, Blind Low Vision NZ is the operating name of the Royal New Zealand Foundation of the Blind, which is a for-purpose organization comprised of a community of individuals who are blind, deafblind, have low vision, or may have a print disability. Blind Low Vision NZ's mission is to empower our members to live the life they choose. I also spoke about Access Matters Aotearoa, who some of you would have met for the first time this afternoon as part of the petition. And I just want to highlight the fact that this is a movement comprised of 20,000 individuals and organizations from not only the disability, but also neurodiversity sectors. And we actively campaign and advocate for legislation to create a fully accessible New Zealand. In our submission, I expressed support for the bill, however, with some reservations. I believe the bill was a step in the right direction, and that something was better than absolutely nothing. Since the written submissions have closed, the organization Blind Low Vision NZ has continued to receive individual advocacy support requests on numerous issues. And unfortunately, nothing in this bill is that as it's proposed will resolve the issue, the barriers being faced by our members. And therefore, at this time, regrettably, my organization cannot support the bill as it's currently written. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. First off, I think we have to acknowledge that internationally, New Zealand is seen as a world leader. We're one of the first to give women the right to vote, first to legislate the 8-hour work week, first to have a transgender MP. So how is it that now New Zealand's fallen behind, so far behind the rest of the world when it comes to disability legislation? How is it that we're now only discussing this, which is something that's been law in the United States of America for over 30 years? And regrettably, as it sits today, the proposed bill is virtually a watered down bill with no mention of standards. I'm going to focus on the importance of standards. So I question, how can a bill not have standards? Standards are vital for consistency across Aotearoa. Without standards, businesses won't know what is expected of them and how to carry it out. And we, most importantly, as a country, won't be able to measure our progress. Standards provide incentive for New Zealand businesses to innovate and develop accessible products. And I suggest those products will be available to be sold globally and create a new export industry for our country. I have to emphasize that this proposed bill must include standards. Standards developed with consultation with our community. Nothing about us without us approach that ensures consultation with people with disabilities and other members of our diverse disability communities and our allies, particularly at the stages of development. New Zealand has an unrivaled resource at its disposal, the lived experience of many disabled people, which I'm sure the Select Committee has heard from to this point and will continue to hear from as you go through your process. I implore you to let's use those resources we have to get the bill right at the outset. When you look at international law and international review, the work that we've done with the Access Matters Aotearoa, it suggests that and what we found is standards exist in several key areas. And I want to highlight those key areas. They exist in employment, the built environment, information and communication technology, communication other than information in communication tech, the procurement of goods, services, and facilities, the design and delivery of programs and services, and last and certainly not least, transportation. I encourage us to learn from these and build on these to make our country the most accessible country in the world, a place where services, products, and places are designed to be accessible for everyone, where all people, regardless of their disability, are included and have an equal opportunity to participate. Access Matters Aotearoa has a roadmap for a barrier-free Aotearoa by 2014 based on 2 basic work streams. 1, developing world-class standards for the short, medium, and long term. And number 2, establishing accessibility standards to support development, the use of standards, educating the New Zealand society on why it's necessary to remove barriers and promote a cultural shift in our country. I suggest to you the government is responsible for turning these standards into regulations that will remove barriers. That is why the organizations that I represent here today ask the government to ensure the inclusion of clear standards in the Accessibility for New Zealanders Bill, standards which are open, access, and freely available. I'm going to call upon my colleague Sarah Mitchell now to augment the presentation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And we're 5 minutes in, so I'll let you know at 10 minutes if
Great.
you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present today on the submission, my oral submissions on the Accessibility for New Zealanders Bill. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm Head of Employment and Youth Transition at Blind Low Vision New Zealand. I am also a lifelong member of the organisation. I do not support this bill as it is currently written for the following reasons. Low vision is all that I have ever known. Despite my disability and living in a world that was not designed for people like me, I have gained a tertiary education, had a career, 2 children, a crossbreed Pommer poodle, owned my own home, and lived and worked overseas. I am not unique or special, I am just me. And naively, I thought that many of my disabled peers would have had an experience similar to myself, a fulfilling and financially independent life. However, this is not the case. I got my first job as a labour inspector in 1992. I should never have applied for that job because a driver's licence was required. I ignored that part of the application. I applied and I got the job anyway. All it took to turn the required into a not required was the willingness of my manager to think outside the square, the confidence to ask some questions, and a bit of practical creative thinking on both of our parts. This simple formula is of designing the employment environment with and not for is all it really takes. And yet, disabled communities continue to represent a disproportionate high rate of unemployment compared to that of the rest of society. When I joined Blind and Low Vision as Head of Employment and Youth Transition in March 2022, I was horrified to discover that the employment statistics for disabled New Zealanders had not shifted from when I commenced my own personal employment journey 30 years earlier. This has me perplexed. How is this possible that 51% of working aged blind persons are either unemployed or underemployed, compared with 3.4% of the general populace? New Zealand is experiencing an unprecedented people resourcing crisis. So how is this so? These damning statistics exist because employment is not a level playing field for disabled persons. The most disabling factors preventing positive employment outcomes for New Zealanders, and in particular, some of these will reference my blind and low vision clients. Societal bias, assumptions made around an individual's ability to perform at work and fully contribute to operational and organisational outcomes. This is the most significant barrier to employment, as detailed in a recent Blind Low Vision New Zealand survey. Inaccessible recruitment processes. Many of our clients experience challenges when applying for roles due to digital recruitment processes being incompatible with certain adaptive technology systems, and psychometric testing and other online time testing methods creating barriers to the first stage of employment process. Not being able to even get out of the starting blocks is demoralising. Just imagine that for yourself or your children.
That's coming up to 10 minutes.
Cool. One more minute.
Yep, sure.
Technology. Even once a client have secured employment, they are still often faced with barriers such as internal systems and software which are not compatible with the systems that they use. And support funds. This MSD financial support is designed to assist the cost of disability to perform at work. The current annual rate of $16,900 was set in 2002 and has not changed in over 2 decades. In order to be eligible to access support funds, the applicant must have a job. However, often they can't get a job because they don't have the right technology or support to apply. And even when they can apply, the access to support funds is provided on an inaccessible format. What a huge loss all of this potential is to the future of New Zealand. Disabled people are resilient, innovative problem solvers who hold the key to a previously untapped talent pool of willing and able employees. Can New Zealand afford to waste this resource that the young person who is of these young people? If nothing is done to change this bill, 30 years from now, the young Sarah of today will be asking, why has nothing changed? Why is the chance of employment no better now than it was for my grandmother? For these reasons outlined above, I do not support the bill as it is currently written. Thank you.
Sarah, we've got 3 questions, one from Anahela, Liz, and also Maureen on Zoom. So if we could go with Anahela first.
Thank you, Sarah, for your insights and for your submission. My question really is to you, John. You used the example of standards from the United States.
Yeah.
Could you expand a little bit more on that? I think I'm particularly looking at examples of standards and consequences when they're not fully applied.
Yeah, so, and thank you for the question. We believe that to ensure consistency, which I think is also another key aspect of having standards, is a regulatory body that can monitor the standards. So the built environment comes to mind. The digital world that we all live in today, some disability groups cannot access their personal banking on the basis of the digital world and the digital experience. And these would be examples where by having standards and expectations and also a regulator to monitor those would overcome some of these significant barriers that exist in society.
Thank you.
We'll come to Liz and then Maureen.
Right, well, thanks, John and Sarah, and thank you for a really comprehensive written submission. And I think you've touched on a significant amount of those points in your oral submission. There's a couple of points that you've made in your written submission you haven't touched on, so just wanting a little bit more information. One is your thoughts around a 3-yearly review of the Act rather than a longer period, and what advantage that would have. And then secondly, just the timely accountability to the House of Representatives. Could you just touch briefly on some of the background to that?
Yeah, so the 3-yearly review, we believe obviously as a new act or a new journey, it's important to assess it early on to make sure it's still fit for purpose. As we know, society will be changing, particularly I keep referencing the digital world. It seems to change a lot, and we think it'd be wise to have a look at it and any adjustments early on in the game versus, a decade down the track where things are changing so rapidly. I'm sorry, the second question?
There's just one, there's a timely accountability to the House of Representatives. I think you just made a recommendation around the Minister presenting the annual monitoring report in terms of as soon as practicable, no later than 20 working days after receiving the report. But if you haven't got the detail on that, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't have the detail on that.
No, that's fine.
What I would again highlight though is the way the bill's currently presented. And I want to build on what Sarah was speaking about employment. We would propose that there be a part of the bill to address that around employability, and obviously to between the close that gap between the general unemployment rates of able-bodied New Zealanders versus disabled New Zealanders. So there's something, and we plan to follow up our submission with some recommendations around that.
Thanks. And we have enough time for one quick question from Maureen.
Hopefully it's quick. The question will be quick. Thank you both. I do note your comments around the committee being empowered to make binding recommendations. I think that's a really good suggestion. So that would be back to the minister. But you've also mentioned setting up a regulator and that this should be a Crown entity. And you've disregarded the Human Rights Commission as being adequate to, to deal with issues on the prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. But I wonder if you have any insights or suggestions about whether the Human Rights Commission could actually be adapted to suit that task, and noting too that the power to issue fines, typically reserved for the courts, but that power can be given to other entities, and local government is a really good example of that. They have the ability to issue fines, so there can be some infringement action if required. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I think your comments or your suggestions are valid. I think what we're trying to say is some sort of regulatory body. So if it's not an independent Crown entity and it can be amalgamated through the Human Rights Commission, and I think we've achieved our goal of what we think is vital in terms of having some sort of body. So that's my response initially to the question.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
We are out of time now. Look, I'd just like to thank you, special personal thank you. You cared very well and supplied and supported my nana for many, many years, and enabled a really wonderful standard of living just by the way that you supported her. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for your submission. We didn't have time to talk about the survey, but it was very good reading and very useful. So thank you so much for coming before us today. Have a good rest of your day. But Sarah, you were reading from some notes.
Yes.
Could we please have those?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
I just need to know who to email to.
The clerks will get in
Okay,
touch with
perfect.
you and we can do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Gary Watts, if you could come to the table, please. Hello, Mr. Watts, and thank you for coming before us today. We are running a little behind time, unfortunately, so thank you for your patience. Would you like a descriptor? I noted you were in the room at the time, but we will still ask if you'd like a descriptor of the members here. Otherwise, if not, you can commence with your submission. Up to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Ms. Chairman. Kia ora koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou koutou, also tualofa. Greetings from Christchurch, and once again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity in making the submission today. First of all, I envisage you have all carefully reviewed my latest section of knowledge, which briefly is a subclause that I've inserted in this particular bill. My name is Gary Watts, and I've been a disability advocate in the health and disability area, and I work right across the board for over 30 plus years. That includes doing some work for the UN, and also doing, I'm a clinic advisor to the World Health Organization. I started off working in mental health when I was in my senior years, and I was the first consumer representative in the mental health area right back in the 90s. So worked through deinstitutionalisation, and then I got involved in senior management. So I've got a good handling. I also have several major disabilities. From birth, I had two legs that were crooked, and I couldn't walk. So consequently, I had to have irons from my waist down to my feet. And they said, there was a possibility I'd never walk. Well, I played rugby and everything like that. So I reckon that's achievement. I've got some information today that may be helpful for any major disaster. It was something, I'll just pass this around. This was prepared by us when I was president of the DPA in Christchurch. Right. And it illustrates in a very clear version of how people with disabilities can address concerns when there's a major disaster.
Thank you. And what we'll do is we'll put that in as a supplementary to your submission so that it's also published online.
Thank you. Also, I was involved in this many years ago. It's the disability strategy, and there was one that came out before this, which was I believe was a tour group right through the whole country. I've also been involved in a lot of projects that will aid people with disabilities. This is a business plan that I prepared several years ago, which would actually enable people to access petroleum products when they drive into petrol service stations.
Right.
So I got funding for doing that, and unfortunately that didn't progress because Scott's Technology in Christchurch weren't interested in developing it because obviously it comes down to the word funding. Sure. Anyway, I'll carry on. The subclause I've mentioned in this particular bill, I believe it will vastly improve the overall purposes of this proposed and I believe much needed new legislation. The new Ministry of Disabilities and the Office for Disabilities, they should be able to provide supports, adequate and appropriate supports to supplement that subclause as well. You've probably noticed I bought a whole lot of hats here today.
Yes.
And I thought I would demonstrate this to illustrate a little bit more clearly the different, not only the different impairments, but also the different sections of society. I'm always one that I like to illustrate these things.
Well, this is good, thank you.
So we could say that this is perhaps people from different ethnic cultures, and we could say that this one is here from people that experience physical disabilities. This one could be from people that say, for example, have different religions. This one could be from people from different genders and, of course, gender orientation. So I guess the list goes on because it actually reflects the whole of society. And I think when I explain to people about disabilities, I say it's not a black and white thing. It's actually, if you look out the window, you don't only see 6 colours of the rainbow, but you actually see multi-million colours. So that's how complex this particular bill is. And I believe that the subclause that I put in may be of adequate assistance in improving the quality and standards of this bill. So, you know, as I said, you know, I've got a range of disabilities that I've had to cope with. My life has been quite varied and very unusual and unique because I've been challenged by a lot of areas. I've been a trained motor mechanic from the age of 15 as an apprentice. I've also worked in the development of the introduction of oil and gas in New Zealand. I worked as Kapuni as an operator. I've also worked in the big Frontier, Kiwi Dairy Company in the manufacture. I was there. We actually got the first powder plant going. I was involved in commissioning and also the new casein plant. So for a person with disabilities, we can achieve these things against all odds. But I guess
Watts, we're nearly at time.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem.
And we do have some questions. So
yeah, no problems.
if you'd like to leave
it would
some
be a
time for
pleasure
questions.
to answer any of those questions because I know they're going to be quite varied and they may be quite interesting too as well.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the illustration of people wearing different hats.
Well, I think we all do as we go through our life, and it's all about experiences and how we experience and how we cope with those challenges.
Absolutely. So we've just got time for one question from Anahela.
Quick one. Oh, thank you, Mr. Watts, for your information. My question, you on the second page of your submission, you referred to annual monitoring report. The committee must, on a 6-monthly basis, provide the minister with a written monitoring report.
Well, I think it's paramount because this is a new legislation which obviously has caused a lot of conflict overseas. I guess I go back to England when they introduced the Discrimination Act over there, and that came in prior to the Olympic Games. And it was interesting that the big, large Ferris wheel, that cost another $8 million because they had to redesign that particular wheel before the Olympic Games. They only had a very short time frame. So what I'm saying is that legislation, we need to look a lot more clearly. And I guess it comes down to all the different, in my subclause, it indicated that we need to have separate committees. And I think that's really the key, because obviously we have people from hearing impairment, you have people with visual impairment, we have people from all sorts of range of disabilities. And as an advocate, I work on the front line, and it's interesting that it's individual circumstances that people are against. And like, for example, I talked to one young lass who actually found that she couldn't get a visa in Christchurch to travel to America, but she'd invited to a camp there. That's the second person that I've spoken from Christchurch to say that they can't get access to achieving a visa to go overseas. So as you can see, there's a whole range of very complex issues, and they go right through all of the areas of society. They don't only go through the business area, but they go through like areas like welfare and everything like that. So.
Look, thank you, Mr. Watts. We have come to the end of your time with us. I'm sorry, Maureen, we don't have time for an additional question, but thank you so much for appearing before us. And
Thank
I
you.
wish you a good rest of your day, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
I liked your hat example.
Yeah, well, I actually play in a pirate
If we
band. I
could
didn't
have-
bring my pirate.
If we could have
hat.
by Zoom the Whakatane
Next time.
accessible and
You got to have a bit of leeway there.
So we are now going by Zoom to the Whakatane Accessible and Inclusive group for 15 minutes. And we will be having, I have down here, Poihaere Morris, Ruth Gerzon and Scott Saunders. I'm not sure if everyone's in the room, if you could perhaps introduce yourselves. So I'm Angie Warren-Clark. I'm the chair of the Social Services Select Committee. Would you like a descriptor of those of us in the room and those on Zoom?
No, I don't think we need that. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's great. So if you could introduce yourselves, take your submission as being read, and thank you for it. If you'd like to leave some time for questions, we'd appreciate it. But and apologies for lateness. We're running a little behind time. So we are in your hands. Thank you.
Kia ora, ko mā tātua te waka, ko pūtawa ki te maunga, ko rangitai ki te awa. Ko Ngāti awa te iwi, ko hau tēnei, ko Poihaere. E mihi kau atu ana kia koutou ki te hunaonga o te moana nui a kiwa, tēnā koe talofa. Kare au e mōhio no kia koe, hoi anō. Kai konei mātou, māua tahi ko takuhua a Ruth e, mihi kau atu ana kia koutou. Kia ora, as you can see, oh well, I don't know whether you can see, I'm sitting in my hospital bed in Whakatane Hospital. I just recently had a stroke last Friday.
Aroha mai.
Oh, don't, kia ora, tēnā koutou. But hey, this is an important kaupapa. So here I am carrying on the work that I said I was going to do. And this is the only way I could jack it up so that I'll be here. So here I am. Kia ora. Tēnā koe, Steph. Kia ora. So I'm just going to read. So bear with me, please, everybody. I might be a bit stumbly with my kōrero, but the heart, the ngākau is here for the disability community. So, so it's good to see that the accessibility bill is in our face right now. And it's good that I'm so happy to be part of it. The Whaikaha Ministry for Disabled People, and I'm reading this as you can see, in case I forget, both examples of leadership from Parliament, however, still has flaws as far as we're concerned. There are no clear standards or accountability. We have difficulty locally with our council. Staff only listen, they've got selective hearing, and they only listen when they feel like it. And we are trying our best to negotiate an agreement for regular hui with them. That's an ongoing thing, and it's been going for a couple of years. However, How much easier would that be if the new accessibility bill was in place with clear standards and accountability?
Yeah.
Okay. Another issue, oh, my glasses are fogging up, sorry. Another
time.
issue is, kia ora, is the headline news recently with Gabriel wreaking havoc across our whenua of Aotearoa and people climbing into ceilings to try and escape from the flooding. You know, the what is in place for disabled people like me, and I'm paralyzed left side down. And on Friday, I had another stroke and I can just barely move my right hand now. So who's going to help me when when there's a flood? If I get caught in a flood, I live on my own. My neighbors are all elderly and well, most of them are. So it's, I wonder about that, but I don't panic. I try not to, but I just think about those people scrambling up into the ceiling. I can't scramble up into the ceiling, So a couple of years ago, Whakatane had another tsunami warning, and luckily my daughter was around. She was home that day and was able to take me up the hills. If she wasn't there, what am I supposed to do? And the kaumātua of our community, of any community, who is there to help them? Those are things that, we think about all the time. The councils need to plan to get us out to safety in emergencies. Koina taku kōrero mo tēnei wā. If you have any questions, please ask. And Ruth will answer them.
Right.
Kia ora, tēnā
Thank you. Look, that was a really good submission. Very real,
ora.
particularly at this time, where we've heard a lot of harrowing stories. And just as an aside, at the moment, my husband has an acquired disability with snapped Achilles, and we live in Tauranga. So when we were planning to, just in case we needed to evacuate him, he had to make the phone call to someone to help him so that he could get out if need be. And there was a plan that we put in place to help and support him to do that. Yeah. But I take your point. A tsunami, we live by the beach. A tsunami is a very different beast to a cyclone or a storm coming. So I think that's a good point, well made. Maureen has a question for you.
Oh, thank you. Look, thank you for going the extra mile to submit from your hospital room. And I'm sure I share the views of the rest of the committee in saying we wish you a very speedy recovery so that you're back at your own place. Thank you for your submission. I do have a question about whether you think the bill as it currently sits and the Accessibility Committee as it stands now would have the ability, or are you confident it would have the ability to address some of the issues that you have concerns about?
Well, I'll just say my little bit, and Ruth will add on to it, is that if you're listening to what we're saying and you and things are put into place, kia ora. That's all I've got to say.
Kia ora.
Yeah, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou.
Okay, everyone, my name's Ruth Gerzon. I'm Ngāti Pākehā. I'm not yet disabled, though I am what is now seen as elderly, I guess, and I am part of a group of seniors and Pākeke in our Whakatane community, but I also have about 4 decades experience in the disability sector and particularly in teaching and advocacy and supporting people with a learning disability to set up people first and those kind of things. So I've got a long history of that. And one thing I say is that I find it quite distressing that disabled people still have to ask people to make accommodations for them. It really, you're advocating and advocating. It's tiring. It's exhausting. Taking things to the Human Rights Commission can take a couple of years. It's not okay. People shouldn't have to be asking all the time. It should be by right that they have accessibility. There should be standards. There should be monitoring. There should be all of these things. Sorry, I'm going in and out of focus, aren't I? There should be, all of these things should be mandatory. We shouldn't keep asking people to be nice to us. We're well past that. It's not okay. So yes, I think the bill's wonderful, Maureen, and other committee members, but only if it is changed to ensure that there are standards and that there's mandatory reporting and accountability. It's got to happen. We can't let this go as it is.
Well said.
Thank you.
Okay, well said. Thank you.
Now we have one final question from Jan Logie.
Kia ora koroa. Thank you for a really powerful submission. I just want to pick up on one of the points in your written submission about the catch cry of the movement that I think our government has echoed before, about nothing about us without us. And your feelings and confidence in terms of the government producing this piece of legislation that doesn't have the backing of disabled people.
Yeah. Such a lost opportunity, isn't it? There's a lot of work's gone into this, a huge amount of government time, a huge amount of your time. It's such a loss of potential. I mean, it could still be changed and needs to be, but they could have got it right from the beginning.
Yes.
If only they had done that, eh? Yeah.
And I'm the pushy one that always promotes and remind people about that catch cry of not about us without us. I'm always pushing that because unless we're heard, what's the point? What else is there to say?
Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our time. Extraordinary that you would make this submission from your hospital.
I hope it makes a difference.
It will make a difference. So thank you. And have a good recovery, as Maureen has said. And thank you for the both of you coming in and submitting for us today. Kia ora. Ka kite.
Kia ora, Steve.
So we now have by Zoom audio described Aotearoa Limited. I have no names for who is participating. Oh, I see a Nicola Owen there. Nicola, it's you're on mute at the moment, but welcome to the Select Committee. Would you like a descriptor of who is in the room?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, so if you'd like to introduce yourself, talk to us to your submission, which you can take as read, and if you'd like to leave some time for questions, we're 15 minutes with you. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora koutou, ngā mihi, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you. Seems a bit rough to have to go up to Poihaere with coming from a hospital bed.
Yeah.
But wonderful to see her. I've had the opportunity to work with Poihaere quite a few times, and wonderful to hear her submission. So, as you said, I'm from Audio Described Aotearoa. My role is as an audio describer and director of that organisation. We audio describe for blind people, mostly in the arts and culture sector, and more recently in some legal settings. We've been doing a bit of work with the Waitangi Tribunal over their health and disability hearings over the last few months. And the areas that I really wanted to focus on, it's the area that we work in, is access to information, participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure and sport, and access to justice, which are Articles 9, 30 and 13 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Disabled People. What I've seen in the last 12 years since I've been involved with audio description is how much information is currently not available to blind, deafblind and low vision people. And it's a major concern. And my real concern is that we have this amazing opportunity to make a difference with accessibility legislation, but that the legislation in its current form won't really stand to make that difference. And we really want to see that opportunity taken to make the changes that are needed. So at present in New Zealand and also in the new legislation, there are no standards or legal requirements for cinemas or galleries or theatres or cultural events, arts events to provide audio description, or even things like information like government adverts to be made accessible. And I was thinking a really great example of that was the hand washing advice that was given at the start of COVID. My partner's blind, and we talked a bit, we've got a 7-year-old as well. We talked a bit about hand washing, and I watched him washing his hands, and I was like, no, you're doing it wrong. There's nothing like the videos that we're supposed to be doing. And he's like, oh, but it says, you turn the tap on and you wash it for this long, and I've sung happy birthday twice, what more do you want? And then we realized, so blind people are all in lockdown. They don't realize that they don't actually have the information about how to wash your hands right. And so we just did it. We created an audio file and a written file and sent it out far and wide, actually internationally, to blind people to make sure they were washing their hands right, which, it's not a big job, but it shouldn't have been our job. That should have been thought right at the start about what are those gaps in information that blind people have. And so we really want to see much more effort put in around standards so that there's clarity about what is expected. And when I think about the legislation, the places that we mostly work in, like I say, access to culture and the arts, which for some people feels like a nice to have, but actually is a really fundamental part of people being able to participate in society. So, for example, this week, we're starting a project around training Māori audio describers. We're going to be at Te Matatini. So we have blind people coming there, blind Māori, who have never felt like they've been able to connect with their culture because there's been no description of kapahaka. And so they've been, they know what it sounds like, but they've no idea what it looks like. And when we have those experiences with people, we start to open people to the possibilities, not only of, going along and listening to some culture, but actually that thought that actually I could be part of that culture, actually being able to claim your own space in the culture that is yours, but that currently is closed to you. And so when I think about, we're based in Auckland mostly, we cover the country, but my home is here in Mangere Bridge in Auckland. Auckland Live is one of the biggest venues here. It's local authority. So it wouldn't be covered by this legislation. Every year, Auckland Live, I don't mean to pick on them because it's not just them, but Auckland Live every year puts on hundreds of shows. And last year, one show was audio described. So that basically says to blind people, you can only come to one thing out of all the things that we put on in our venues. And I genuinely do not think that is good enough. It doesn't give blind people the choice to participate in the way that they need to. Also thinking about, particularly some of those government videos, that most of them currently don't have descriptive transcripts, which are necessary for deaf-blind people, often to be able to access really vital information. And so that need for standards and clarity is really important. Many of the organizations that I work with see accessibility as a nice to have if there's ever any spare money. And if you've ever worked in the arts, there's never any spare money. Sometimes they're lucky enough to get charity funding, but if they don't, then there's no audio description. And so blind people, not just blind people, right? Lots of disabled people, but I'm particularly talking about my area. They're seen as an optional extra. And this really needs to change if we're going to transform society in the way that we want to. Now, I've done a lot of work over the years in sort of the disability area. And we know there are lots of committees of disabled people advising government, advising local government. But the problem is that those committees rarely are there at the sharp end. They're rarely there at the point at which decisions are made and where the money is spent. I've spent lots of time being involved in helping to coordinate Hui, where people put in amazing input, but by the time the project plan comes out, a lot of that has been pushed out because of competing priorities. And so a proposal to have another committee doesn't really give us any teeth to actually change anything. We really need standards, a way to monitor to enforce improvements, and so have some kind of body that sets those standards, and also somewhere where people can go if their rights are breached. At the moment, there's so many different places that you need to go to that there's nobody really collating that information. And actually, you know, you talk to any disabled person, they'll tell you what the issues are. It's not that we don't know what the issues are, it's just that there's no way of enforcing it. I also have concerns about, there's talk about maybe the committee being based within Whaikaha. That strikes me as a bit of a conflict of interest. You know, they're already in government, and also their role in so many disability services. So we're really looking, we want legislation that covers all domains, not just government, but also local government and the private sector. And I know that for many of the organisations I work with, they just want the standards. They want to know what they're supposed to do, and they want those standards to apply to everybody so that everybody's on a level playing field. Because what happens at the moment is the ones that put in the extra effort, they're the ones that are bearing all the costs. And if we just had standards and a level playing field, then everybody could just do it, and anybody could go and take part in cultural events and have access to that information that they need. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicola. A really good submission. We've got Maureen's hand up by Zoom, so we'll move to Maureen. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Nicola, thanks very much for your submission, and you know, from looking at it from your perspective, we've heard from a lot of submitters about the standards that they see are required. I just wonder if you thought that as the legislation is written, do you think that the Accessibility Committee will be able to be that advocate on behalf of the people with disabilities to be able to deliver those standards that you've mentioned?
I don't see that being a successful method for setting it up, to be honest with you.
Oops, frozen.
I think there are a number of problems with it. You know, at the moment, they don't have the ability to set standards in that way. But also that there are so many areas of life that needs to be dealt with, you know, like at the moment, you know, it feels like audio description seems quite frivolous when you've got a massive cleanup from a cyclone, right? So if I was on that disability committee, I'd be like, right, what are we doing about emergency management? And that would be fine. But then there's always something else to do. There's always something that means that the standards don't get put in place. And so I think it puts a lot of pressure on a very few disabled people to be seen to be representative of the whole disability community. They'll be forced to prioritize down to what's really urgent, and all of these things that are basically in the UN CRPD, things that we've already signed up to that could easily be translated into standards that we begin to monitor or enforce. A committee isn't going to do that. A committee is not going to achieve that, and that's my concern. But also that committee on its own doesn't have any teeth. It can't do anything apart from advise somebody else who can choose to take their advice or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. It doesn't appear that we have any other questions in the room. However, I'd just like to acknowledge that your submission has raised a number of matters which we've heard a number of times. It's a lot of the themes that are coming through. So it's no indication that we're not interested in your submission, that we're not asking further questions. Look,
yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you so much for your time, and I really hope that we can get some really good legislation that's going to make changes to the lives of disabled people.
Yeah, really valuable submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we now have, if they're available, inclusive Greens by Zoom. Just coming through.
That's the information that they need.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Hello again, Áine. Áine, I should say.
Yeah.
Áine. We are here with the Inclusive Greens by Zoom. We have 15 minutes. Please take your submission as being read. Would you require a descriptor of those of us in the room?
No, that's okay, thanks. Maybe you could just quickly run through people's names, but we don't need a description, thank you.
Sure. Karen Shaw is out of the room and she's to my left. I'm in the centre, Angie Warren Clark. Then we have Anahira Kanoata Suisuiki. Then we have Dr. Liz Craig, Dr. Emily Henderson, Teresa Ngobi, and then Jan Logie at the end of the table. And then on Zoom, we have Maureen Pugh. So we have, we're not having any difficulties with technology at the moment. So if you can please go ahead and talk to us about your submission, and please leave some time for questions. Thank you.
Aotearoa, I'm Jonty, one of your co-conveners of Intrusive Dreams. I'm speaking as a white male who has autism, as well as, you may notice, speaks with a speech impediment. But I'm speaking on behalf of our Pt2 faction, which represents disabled people within your Green Party of Aotearoa in New Zealand. And while we fully support our party's position in opposition to this bill, I would like to stress that we are all speaking our own opinions and not the views of your party. We believe, as many previous submissions, that this bill not only doesn't go far enough, but is in fact extremely dangerous and to do severe harm to your disabled community. We see this bill as intentionally ableist and would explain that it has been drafted by Parliament with very few disabled members and has only offered tokenistic support to members of your community. We would recommend that your committee sees this bill as unfit to proceed further and starts again. Why is this? Disabled people like myself have been largely represented by people who do not see our best interest at heart. I have spent years as an autistic member going through the education system and the ATA uni system, being told your right sins, but not being given appropriate support. At school, I was only entitled to 9 hours of support a week, despite not being able to write. And what I'm saying is, we already know what is needed. Disabled people live in a world where we can see what's wrong. And one more committee will not hope that. What we need is a binding criteria to ensure our rights, yet every other major group in society has. And I will now pass to my co-convenor, Áine, to talk further.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thanks for that, Jonty, and kia ora again to the committee. So I'll talk a little bit about the Greens' positioning on this bill. So since the inception of the campaign, which you'll be aware of from Access Matters, who also delivered a petition to Parliament today to massively strengthen this bill, our party has supported the introduction of accessibility legislation, which includes standards, which is really doing what the Disability Convention asks in terms of making, buildings, environments, information, transport accessible to our community. And Mojo Mathers, a deaf MP, has really championed that support of the campaign and also from before that as well. So our party's support for this type of legislation goes back a long way. And that position, as well as our current position on this particular bill, from the party's position, has been informed throughout by the Inclusive Greens, so our network. And a core principle for the Green Party is called appropriate decision making. And that means that people who are affected by the decisions, are impacted by those decisions, are a key part of what the decision making is. And this is really a principle which, the Labour government and Parliament has not upheld so far around this accessibility legislation. So what we support is systems level change, which takes the burden off of disabled people to have to be, advocating all the time. This is the same as what Nicola was just saying just before us about the creation of the committee. That leaves the burden on disabled people, that committee model. So we support an independent entity like a disability commission, which would have the power to develop standards and to review them and enforce them. So the enforceable standards there are a key pillar of the legislation. We want the scope to be widened so legislation would not just cover government, but would also cover local government and would cover private entities that deliver services which are public facing. And, in order for the Disability Rights Convention and Te Tiriti to really be honored, that process has to go back to what we were talking about and what a lot of submissions have talked about, and the need for this bill to actually be rewritten, from the ground up and co-designed this time with disabled people, including tangata whaikaha / whanahawa, so disabled Māori as well as a really key part of that. Inclusive Greens also really encourage Parliament to consider that accessibility is one very important aspect of human rights, but there are a lot of other aspects of human rights legislation where disabled people's rights are not upheld, and that also needs to change. So just to emphasize again that this current bill does not do any of what we need it to do by creating only a committee. And for this reason, as Jonty said, we consider it tokenistic and ableist. And so we are obliged to, oppose this current bill, but we do strongly encourage the committee to actually take the perspectives of disabled people who have been saying in so many different ways, it's so tiring navigating in an inaccessible world. And here we are having to then advocate for this bill on top of that. So we really want this bill to be massively strengthened, and we see the way to do that as rewriting it in conjunction with the disability community and really trying to rebuild that trust which has been so badly eroded. And now I'll pass over to fellow Inclusive Greens member Neelu.
Kia ora koutou. Am I on mute?
No, you're good.
You're
cool.
not.
Cool, perfect. So kia ora koutou, my name is Neelu Jennings, and I'm a disabled woman with a visual impairment and a balance impairment. I've lived in New Zealand all my life. I acquired my disability at age 16, so I have a really clear understanding of what life is like living with a disability and what life is like living without a disability. I'm a fairly busy mum with 2 kids. So as an able-bodied person, accessibility was not even an issue I even thought about at all. It was an inherent concept that I just took for granted. And if something was inaccessible, I would just adapt as an able-bodied person can do and carry on with my life. It just wasn't something that I thought about. However, this is not always possible for disabled people, and it means that people miss out on opportunities. So I can think about times when I've missed out on opportunities because I have not been able to access something, or something has not been accessible to me. And it also means that, for a lot of other people, for myself as well, or I've had to be in very, very uncomfortable circumstances. The one thing that I find the most frustrating about accessibility or inaccessibility is the inconsistency of it all. I can never be sure of how long a journey will take, how easy a journey will take that I'm going to make, or a service, or about a service, how accessible a service will be that I need to use. The effects of that I have to put up with times of high stress and anxiety. I'm unable to structure my time appropriately, and I can never be sure of what I will need to contend with. I'm constantly forced to seek a support to help me, and my autonomy is always is often compromised. This makes me feel disenfranchised, disrespected, and undervalued. These feelings feed into the grief rhetoric that I've fought so hard to get rid of, that I've had since I first had my disability. And that grief rhetoric only ever comes up in some situations. And when I face an inaccessible situation, that's one of the times that I start to relive the grief that I feel as a disabled person. So I guess my community already had to live with the issues that their impairment poses, and that takes time and energy. And for us to have to grapple with a society that is an environment that is inaccessible just adds to that time. I also face a lot of fatigue when I'm forced to be in those situations, and I feel that makes it makes me feel undervalued, really undervalued. As a mum, well, as a person, I have to make calls. I have to think about whether a situation is worth me accessing or not, like whether I should go on a journey, because I know that there could be potentially inaccessible parts of that journey which will cause me mental fatigue and take my time, take extra time, and I have to make a call whether it's really worth me putting my time and effort and energy into that, whether I'm going to actually get a benefit out of it. And then the other thing is that as a mum, I don't want my children to have to face the same inaccessible situations that I face, and in order to prevent that, I end up not taking them places. We miss out on a lot of opportunities because I don't want to face the inaccessibility of the situations. And I don't want them to have to face those situations, which they inevitably will if they're with me.
Excuse me, Neelu, we're nearly at time. Did the Greens want to have questions? I'm really happy to continue to hear a very articulate submission, however, up to you.
That's all good. Does Vicky want to continue?
We have time?
Yeah, just go briefly, Vicky.
Yep. Okay, so I wanted to briefly talk about ableism. So it's kind of a big word, a complex word, and I find that people either kind of dismiss it because they don't fully understand the damage it does, or can kind of hear it as an insult. It's not an insult. I've had to work really hard on my own internalized ableism. I believe we all have it. It's part of just a product of being a society. So I don't mean it as an insult, but I do view this word as a very big deal. And I view it as a big deal because of the harm it causes, the lifelong harm these attitudes cause. So we've argued the bill is ableist, but we are also going to put out that this experience, this process is ableist. So my accessibility request to the committee was not fully respected, and I choose to interpret that as a lack of understanding, of lack of knowledge. And I think that's usually behind most of ableism. Less understandably, however, was learning that a committee member views potential risk in employing disabled people. The fact that these kind of ableist attitudes are spoken out loud to disabled people in this forum is not acceptable to me. It makes me feel that we're not anywhere near on the same page on ableism. And that's a concern when you're responsible for ensuring our rights. So I'm respectfully just quickly asking the committee and in fact, all MPs to be open to challenging possible personal ableism, so that we can fairly determine the path forward for our rights. And if you are indeed committed to disability rights, that does mean listening to the disabled community. So, kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. Look, I am really sorry, but we are now out of time. I think you've made your points extremely well and also very poignantly. So thank you for coming before us. We're now going to move to the next submitter, but if you want to send in any additional notes that you've been reading from, etc., please do so to add to our submission that we already have from you. Thank you. I'm now going to hand the chair over to Anahila Kanoa-Suiki. Sorry, a long day. I need to leave the room for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your submission. Our next submitter is Latoa Halatau-Talagi on Zoom. I can't see. Is he on? Okay. Falafalaiatu Latoa. Can you hear me?
You're on mute.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Latoa.
Sorry, Chair. Falafalaiatu te mutoro osi.
Yeah.
Whakaue ko mai ke tūtala he awhiawhi nei. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to the select committee in this process. This is my first time, and forgive me if I'm not looking at the camera. Usually I don't have it on, but Latoa Halatau-Talagi.
Yeah, thank you, Latoa. Since it's your first time.
Yes.
My name is Anahila. I'm currently standing in for the chair. Would you like me to describe to you who is in the room, or are you okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'll go through them very quickly. So we'll start with, on my left, we've got Karen Shaw. She's a list member of parliament from the ACT Party. And then on my right, Karen is wearing pink and a floral dress. On my right, I've got Dr. Liz Craig from Invercargill. She's wearing black and a blue floral dress. Dr. Emily Henderson from Whakatane. She's wearing a purple floral dress, glasses. Then we have Teresa Ngobi, a MP based in Otaki. She is wearing mustard yellow, I think. She's Samoan and she's got black hair.
She looks
and
very
cool. Last but not least, we've got Jan Loki. She's got cool blonde spiky haircut, and she's wearing navy blue dark clothes. And in the room is all our staff and a couple of members of the public. So on Zoom, Maureen Pugh is wearing orange with glasses and dark hair. So welcome to the Select Committee. You have 10 minutes. Take that your submission has been read, and the time is yours. Is over to you now, Latoa.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and committee. It's my background, of course. I'm of Niue ethnicity. Niue, of course, was colonized after the annexation of Niue in early 1900s by New Zealand. So the history is there. It's colonized. So I came to New Zealand as a citizen already of New Zealand, and my disability journey happened when I was a teenager, playing the national game, rugby, detached retina, and the rest is history. That left me with partial vision in one eye. I use a cane to get around safely. So access to the environment that is safe, getting around the streets, and ensuring that I don't get into any harm's way. So an environment that is accessible and planned well, so there's no obstacles and footpaths and so forth. So local council is important that they are covered, so that the usual obstacles of walking into signs on the footpaths, bicycles, e-scooters. So those sort of things make it difficult to get around safely in the community. So if this bill becomes an act, those areas won't be covered. So that's important as my daily life impact of inaccessible environment where I live. But my background is as a social worker. I chose that so that I can help other people less fortunate than I. And a lot of them are blind people. And for the first 20 years, I worked in rehabilitation and habilitation with the Blind Foundation, working in the community. And my natural, gravitation was to help people like myself who find themselves in a city and come from the Pacific countries, all countries. So I see the challenges they have. Now, my current role is as a advocate in disability development. So I am currently the co-chair of the Pacific Disability Forum, which next week will be holding its Pacific Disability Regional Conference in Fiji. But I'm exposed to international development, and I know the path that the United Nations, through the ad hoc committee, how New Zealand championed and played a leading role in getting the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So already New Zealand has a reputation to set a standard. And I have been to Geneva as part of the New Zealand delegation to review progress in New Zealand's journey in implementing the convention in 2015. That was the first progress report, and recently one has already been done. But if I can look at that experience and see how New Zealand's place in the world in terms of how it will be seen that it is not going to live up to the full commitment of the ratification of the treaty, the convention. In fact, it will show that it is stepping back in its commitment. So I think that is a loss. That's a loss of, place in world standing. And if I look at the all of the small island countries that I work with, they will be looking at New Zealand as an example. And if this is forming a committee to look at accessibility is the answer, then that's going to bring the bar very low. Basically, I agree with the disability community and others that forming a committee doesn't go far enough. In the CRPD, if I can refer to that convention, reasonable accommodation is an important part of shifting the attitudes and development to be more inclusive of disabled people. And this will confuse the population, the workforce, planners, educators. So we don't even have a proper definition of what is reasonable accommodation in the CRPD here in New Zealand. It has the Ombudsman playing a role, but that is so far removed from everyday life that hardly anyone that I know of will take the effort to approach the Ombudsman for instance, going to the local shops and falling over some obstacle on the road or on the footpath when it shouldn't have been there. And planning could have, and compliance of regulations and rules would have avoided that. So we've got an opportunity here to set real standards. And if we don't have standards and we only have a reasonable accommodation as the bar, and hardly anyone knows the definition of what reasonable accommodation is, that's going to result, in my opinion, in more problems.
Whawelahi, Latoa, we've got 2 minutes left of your time. We do have one person with a question, so you got a choice to finish your 2 minutes by yourself, or we could ask the question.
Well, you can ask the question, and I'm happy to send in my further notes that I prepared.
Great. Well, thank you. We'll have 2 minutes, and we'll send the question later. Do you want to finish your submission?
I think he was going to send in the notes.
Send in the notes, okay? Okay.
Yes.
We have a question from the member, Maureen Pugh.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Chair. Latoa, you mentioned in some detail about the setting up of the Accessibility Committee. I just wonder if you thought if the committee was given some further authority or delegations, or their recommendations were binding to the minister, whether that would be more acceptable to you? Because our role is to try and improve the legislation as much as we can.
Yes, I think that probably it's going to be gathering evidence, research, and all that. That's the type of work that it'll be doing, and it'll be advising and prioritizing implementation of those. Will be just it'll be a very competitive process to get disability issues met in the mainstream.
Thank you, Member Pugh, for your question. And Whawelahi, Latoa, you've done a really great submission. We are out of time, but if you could please send your information that you read to us. And also, just last question from me, not often do we get Pacific people submitting. So with your experience, if you feel you can send some supplementary information about your experience working as a social worker with the Pacific Disability, that would be great too. So Whawelahi Mahaki, thank you for your information, and we're now out of time.
Thank you.
We're going on to the next submitter now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now have in person and by Zoom the PSA Deaf and Disabled Network. You come to the table.
Oh, you want us where?
Beg your pardon?
You want us where?
Come to the table. So we have 2 members by Zoom. Is that all the members that you'll be having by Zoom?
We think there were some people who are going to try to come, but if they're not here, these are the people who are speaking here.
Okay, that's great. Look, please take your submission as read, and thank you for it. Would you like a descriptor? I know you've been in the room, but happy to.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm Angie Warren-Clark. I am the chairperson. I keep describing it as dark and slightly floral outfit on. I have long blonde hair, glasses, and bad posture. This chair is killing me. So welcome. Move on.
Kia ora, Ana Hila. I'm a Labourist MP based in Papakura. I'm wearing black, a pounamu and some shells.
Kia ora, I'm Liz Craig, Labourist MP based down in Invercargill, and I'm wearing a navy floral dress.
Kia ora, I'm Emily Henderson. I'm the Whangere MP for Labour. I'm wearing a purple floral dress. I'm Pākehā. I have short, spiky grey hair and glasses.
I'm Teresa Ngui. I'm the Labour MP for the Otaki electorate. I'm Scottish Samoan, so I have quite brown skin, long brown hair, and a mustard dress. Kia ora koutou, I'm Jan Logie, Green Party MP. I've got grey hair with blonde in it, short spiky, wearing a dark outfit, really showing my Scottish ancestry.
I'm Karen Chor, Activist MP based in Upper Harbour. I'm wearing a pink jacket with a light floral top, and I've got long brown hair, and I'm Māori European.
And finally, by Zoom, we have Maureen Pugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Maureen Pugh, Nationalist List MP based in West Coast Tasman, and I've got short dark brown hair and glasses, wearing a bright orange top today. Thank you.
Thank you. So please take your submission as read. And if you'd like to leave time for questions, I can let you know at 10 minutes or sometime, whatever you prefer.
Thank you. My name is Claire Vincent, and we, the PSA Deaf and Disabled Network, represent workers within the wider public sector, whether it be local government body, NGO, or government departments who live with disabilities. As a group, we also represent a wide range of disabilities. We also know that while we have disabilities that are different, some of our accessibility needs are very similar. For example, I have a learning disability, but I lack audio discrimination. But some of my peers who are hard of hearing or audio disabilities cannot hear at all, but we have a similar accessibility need. Right. While that element is true, that we have very diverse disabilities but similar accessibility needs, there is a reverse that is equally true. So we can have very different, similar disabilities, but very different accessibility needs. When addressing accessibility in New Zealand, it is important to remember that accessibility is not just about removing barriers to those traditionally thought as disabled, whether it be accessible in terms of physical accessibility or sensory accessibility, which is the traditional mindset. It is also about removing the barriers that are associated with neurodiversity or other forms of disability that are not visible in the first instance. This oral submission, we will be hearing from the very lived experiences of our membership who are experiencing a wide range of disabilities, but also in the accessibility. the first barrier that we're going to hear from is from Marcus, who is online. He's going to give us an example of his lived experience of being an employee in the workforce who has accessibility. Marcus, over to you.
Hi, kia ora, my name's Marcus Hutching, and I'm a member of the Deaf and Disability Network Committee. I work as a community support worker for Healthcare New Zealand. There is no support for me as a disabled worker to accommodate me in my role as a support worker. There now where to get I don't know where to get support for me as a disabled worker or accommodate to get that support. So there's a lack of resources for the disabled person for disabilities in the environment. I've had physical disabilities as well as hearing, as well as dyslexia, and my experience with this. Also, I've been in a wheelchair. So the lack of resources, environment. When I was doing my levels as a support worker, there was no support for my dyslexia. I had to rely on friends and family. That was very stressful time. I also wanted to talk about the problems are currently created by the lack of minimum standards for accessibility. I used to use a wheelchair. Just after they did up the Claudelands Event Centre in Hamilton, I went with my auntie and mother to the craft fair. I needed to go to the toilet. I tried to get there, but the doors to get to the toilets were not wide enough for my wheelchair. Behind those doors, there was a beautiful disabled toilet, but the toilet I tried to get through the doors was standard and would not fit my wheelchair. So I had to get up out of my wheelchair. My auntie and mum had to help and push the wheelchair through, collapse it, so that I was able to get into the toilet and access the toilet. And this was just done up. My mum tried to help me while my auntie collapsed the wheelchair and brought it through. If the door was wide enough, I would have been able to go through independently, just like anyone else. Without minimum standards, disability people can get shut out of supposedly accessible facilities. That's been my experience. There just isn't the accessibility for a wide range of things, and as disability people, we want the independence to be able to do. We just need the support to do it, and I feel that the setting up a committee doesn't go far enough. I feel that there needs to be more work around the support of disability people in a range of areas. Thank you.
Good. And another for the next 3 statements comes from our members. We're reading them on their behalf. So please note that. If your brain or body is different to the majority of what you should, you should still be able to participate actively in all of society. Services, workplace, homes, and the community spaces should be designed to be accessible to everyone. Even those whose bodies or brains appear to match the majority will benefit from these well-designed spaces. Accessibility is not about the physical space. It includes the way that services, work, houses, and recreation spaces are structured, distributed, and valued.
Hello, Glenn Walker. I am the co-convenor of the Deaf Disabled Network Committee. So I'll read the next 2 statements from our members. Because I am not visually disabled, my needs are often dismissed and the risk of souring workplace relationships means I often grin and bear situations like noisy, crowded environments, which cause distress and impact productivity. Another example, I benefit enormously from closed captioning. However, it is exhausting to have to keep asking for it. I hope an accessibility law would improve workplace conditions enough that I could focus more of my energy on actually working. Okay, and the last one is my team have daily stand-ups and I'm excluded from reporting on my workload for the day. Several times I've been asked to book an interpreter at short notice, and this means that I miss out on information at team meetings when an interpreter is not available. Workbridge funding covers the interpreter costs, which I manage, but when this runs out, I'm expected to cover the costs instead of my employer. I have worked for my employer for over 19 years and have had no opportunity offered to me for personal development to enable me to grow and progress within the organisation. I would like to be treated fairly and the same as my colleagues. Thank you.
In closing summary, we would like to reiterate our call for the bill to be amended to include minimum standards. As you've heard, the lack of minimum standards is hurting at least 25% of the population. If you include the elderly, that is greater.
Everyone.
We would like timeframes for the implementation of those minimum standards to be stated. In addition to that, having the ability to act on breaches for those who do not see disability as their problem, we would like that ability to be included in the Act. Not because the majority are good, but because there is a minority who harm. This is our collective view as workers who are working in your workforce today who would like that viewpoint expressed. It is all. Thank you.
Great solution.
Thank you. We are unfortunately out of time, but a superb submission. Great examples as well of discrimination in the workplace. We are continuing to work on this bill, but I take the minimum standards, timeframes stated, and act on breaches as key to your submission. So thank you for coming before us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Claire Vincent by Zoom.
Not by Zoom. Here. When you're ready.
It was a quick change.
I know, it's nice and simple, right?
All right, Claire, we have you for 10 further minutes. So it's really good that you are able to continue your submission. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So firstly, while I respect the intent behind this act, as a personal person who is submitting on this bill, I have to say it is an incredibly appalling ableist bill. There is some very concerning elements to this. The first point I would like to raise, which I have not actually seen raised before, is the fact that it is legislating business as usual activities. There is nothing stopping a minister taking advice from their ministry as a part of business as usual. You're now legislating it. Does this mean that we need to legislate business as usual activities for a policy decision? The answer is no. This is ridiculous. And we need to nip that in the bud. It should never be a conversation within our society where business as usual activity from a ministry to a minister becomes a legislative dialogue. There is also a concerning element over this, which is the ableism over, we've dealt with that, we can put it to a side. No, you haven't actually addressed your inherent ableism. As members of parliament, to be blunt, as somebody who implements legislation as a living, I implement your own legislation. This is a terrible piece of law. I have no idea what I'm implementing, and it is no value at all. So what are you asking me, the public, or anyone else to implement? This is a terrible piece of law. You must put aside this first draft, which, to be fair, is the first draft. You put your best foot forward, you got it slightly wrong. So I'm here to tell you, as a private citizen who implements legislation, what your best foot forward should be. These are elements that have been pulled from existing legislation devices, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel. The first point is implement principles. You already have principles in the Privacy Act, irrespective of it be the previous act or the current 2020 Act. Doesn't matter. You have this mechanism, this wonderful mechanism called principles. You already know about it. The judiciary already knows about it. You can work within it. The next level down is regulations. Now, there are a swathe of legislation with regulations in it, right? From Residential Tenants Act, the Building Act, health-related acts, doesn't bloody matter. You have regulations. And this is the key point for those of you who are nervous for the commercial element of it. You have the ability to put in a regulation and then give yourselves the liberty of 3 years to implement it. To be fair, even though the disability community, and I'm one of them, are going to be really nervous about a 3-year implementation period, we are asking for significant shifts in mindset. And having a long lead time where you can plan, where as an implementer, for my own personal sake, believe me, I watch parliamentary TV, I'm not willing to look forward to this. Just saying, it's a drinking game from my point of view. But really, 3 years is a minimum from enactment to give people the chance to go, oh, these principles that you want to implement and these things that you're signaling are what we're wanting to do. This is how we're going to achieve them. It is actually a fair and reasonable element. Your next element down is coming down into the unfortunate element over what's called coercive isomorphism, which is to say, we are going to achieve change, but we need to slap somebody about. That slightly, shall I say, yeah, simplifying it by a lot. Coercive isomorphism is relating to a state of change, but we need to be coercive over it. And it's simply recognizing that no matter what we say or do, some are going to be, that's not my problem. And it's not until you slap somebody about and give them a coercive reason that they will meet it. We call it, what's the word, pictorial penalisms, and you'll see it in the Residential Tenancy Act, for example, and other forms of the Health and Safety in the Workplace Act is another way of not opting out of our responsibility. Those are the types of acts that you want to look at as we've already got these structures in place. We don't need to revisit them. But this sort of slap down is the element necessary for those who are the 20% minimum. There is nothing wrong with you also making 20% who are first movers having a financial benefit either. For example, the Sudama hotel range. We stayed there recently as a PSA delegate group, and we had a wonderful proactive and positive disability experience. There's nothing wrong with making people who are the first movers receiving a benefit for being the fact that they are first movers. It is about getting that balance right.
Now, Claire, we are at time. Maureen, by the way, you're not on silent. So
sorry.
We could hear you sneezing. I see you've got your hand up. Have you got a very quick question? Because we're, you're not getting the opportunity to ask questions.
Yes. Just a very quick one. Thank you, Claire. I just wonder, like in terms of us improving this bill, do you think that giving further authority to this accessibility committee will help improve it? And we've talked about this with other submitters, and then or even binding recommendations to the minister. Do you think we could strengthen it that way, or do you think it's not salvageable?
No, I don't think the current version is salvageable. We need to rewrite the bill as it is. There is already a well-versed act that has already been written by not so much the Law Society, but I cannot remember who they are, and I can submit this to you.
Thank you.
But they have written a structure. My comments were only ever meant to be giving you a backbone or a structure to work off. I know that in human nature, you will not let go of something until you have something to work towards. So let go of this and work towards those other principles.
Thank you, Claire. We are at time. Appreciate your submission.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Maureen, if you can go on mute, please.
Well, and I'll lower my hand.
Yeah, thank you. We're now moving on to CCS Disability Action by Zoom. And I understand that we're going to have Phoebe Grace Edenman in the room by Zoom.
Can you guys hear me?
We can. Now we can't see you, Phoebe. That's okay if that's by design.
Not intentionally, but by design. However, my Wi-Fi is playing up, so playing safe, we're just going to keep the video off.
Awesome. Now, Phoebe, I'm Angie Warren-Clark, the chair. Do you need a descriptor of those of us in the room? No? Great. Just take your submission or the submission as read. If you'd like to leave some time for questions, I can tell you at about 10 minutes that you're at 10 minutes, and then give us 5 minutes for questions. Thanks, Phoebe. We're in your hands.
Awesome. Right, so I'm Phoebe, and I'm the National Policy Analyst for CCS Disability Action. We are a community organisation that is primarily service provision, but we also have a kind of advocacy wing as well. So thank you for the opportunity to submit on the bill. We are pleased that accessibility is being discussed, and we do really support the continued drive to improve accessibility within the disability community. However, we do have some very significant concerns about this proposed legislation as it stands. The proposed bill, it's very aspirational with minimal to no real world substance. So rather than making accessibility a fundamental right, this bill is at present, we believe, a big missed opportunity. We're concerned about that given the lack of measurable goals, expectations, compliance guidelines, that this bill is simply going to be ineffective at improving the state of accessibility for disabled people in Aotearoa. So I've got a couple of points I really want to go over. So I'll be going over accessibility as a right, the role of the proposed committee, accessibility standards, and measurable outcomes. So talking about accessibility as a right, accessibility, it's not a guaranteed right in New Zealand under the current legislation, but it is something that requires ongoing advocacy at both an individual and systemic level. Even though it's not a guaranteed legislative right, it should be, because under the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Article 9, accessibility is, which we're a signatory of, accessibility is to enable persons with disabilities to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life, and that states parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure persons with disabilities equal access on basis with others. We don't have legislation in Aotearoa that specifically enshrines that as a fundamental right, and because of that, we believe that we are failing to meet our obligations under the convention. It is within the powers of the Select Committee to require a rewrite of the proposed legislation, and that is what we're recommending first and foremost. We would like to see a complete rewrite that encompasses the aspirational aims that exist presently, as well as creating clear steps that must be taken to achieve the end goal of improved accessibility for all New Zealanders. If rewriting is not an option, and we know that's a big ask, but if rewriting is not an option, we strongly believe that the bill must be dramatically strengthened if it is ever to be an effective piece of legislation. One of the biggest things that we recommend in order to, strengthen it and make it effective and, support and meet the needs of the disability community is we strongly recommend adopting the 13 principles created by Access Matters Aotearoa. The proposed 13 principles form a basis of an Accessibility for New Zealanders Act that would be truly transformational, enshrining accessibility as a fundamental right, ensuring that all New Zealanders are able to live full and meaningful lives as per our obligations under the Convention. So moving on to the role of the committee, we are pleased with the creation of the committee, and we believe that the selection process for the members is robust and will actually ensure diverse representation. We are especially pleased at the requirement of a majority of the members being disabled people rather than non-disabled people with lived experience of disability, which often in that context means that they've worked within the sector or they have a disabled family member, which isn't the same thing as being a disabled person. It's a different, it's a different lived experience. So too often disabled people's voices are drowned out by non-disabled people with lived experience, but the selection process for the committee aims to avoid that. So we are very pleased with that aspect of it. However, we do have significant misgivings about the limitations of the proposed committee, and we believe that the bill would be strengthened if the powers of the committee were expanded. The only guarantee of the bill is an establishment of a ministerial advisory committee who will produce an annual report. In our view, this is insufficient and it is tokenistic. We recommend drastically expanding the role and responsibility of the committee, which moves us on to accessibility standards. Accessibility standards for us is the biggest thing that's missing out of this bill. If we're going to be talking about accessibility, we have to have accessibility standards. As it stands, the bill has minimal, if any, real world impact. For it to be meaningful, as well as for us to meet our obligations under the convention, We have to have a comprehensive accessibility standards and a regulatory framework. There's already been significant work undertaken within the community that lays out clear aims and measurable goals regarding accessibility issues. It's our firm belief that if this legislation is to have any meaningful impact, that the 13 principles set out by Access Matters Aotearoa must be adopted. We also envisioned that by expanding the role of the committee, that establishing a comprehensive and regulatory framework would be possible. Under an expanded role, the committee would have the responsibility and power to develop, review, and enforce accessibility standards. This would ensure that accessibility standards were being upheld, and if a disabled person faced access barriers or discrimination, that there would be an entity for them to turn to for assistance. Part of an expanded role would also include education and guidance for both public and private sectors, as well as establishing private expectations for private entities. At present, there is nowhere for disabled people to turn if they face access barriers. There is no formal recourse available. But by
my Phoebe, we're at 10 minutes, so just carry on.
No, that's all good. There is no formal recourse available, but if we expand this role and scope of the committee, we will have an opportunity to establish the foundations of a transformative framework for disabled people. Also, we need to establish a formal disputes process. It's vital to improving the legislation as it stands. I'll skip ahead a bit because I think questions are probably quite important. So although we are pleased that accessibility is being discussed on a legislative level, we don't believe that this bill in its current state will be effective or have any meaningful impact on the lives of disabled people in Aotearoa. Without access standards, clear expectations and compliance, this bill is simply tokenistic at best. We have not only an opportunity, but an obligation to set the foundation for long-lasting transformative accessibility framework, but significant changes are needed to achieve that. And take any questions.
Oh, great, Phoebe. Thank you so much. We have a question from Liz Craig, but before we move to that, I'd just like to thank you for a very clear submission, well laid out for us, and good footnotes and attachments as well, or links, hyperlinks as well. So
yes, I come from I'm a disabled person, but I come from an academic background where if you don't provide references, you get in trouble. Therefore, all of my submissions have many, many references.
Right. Thank you so much. We noted that. So I'll come now to Liz Craig.
Thank you, Phoebe. Actually, as a fellow academic in a prior life, yeah, I acknowledge that. Hey, just on a related note, in your written submission, I think you touched on it briefly in your oral submission, talking about the need for improving disability data. And yes. I think what you're saying in your written submission is needing robust and usable data that can be used to track measurable outcomes. What did you have in mind there in terms of, were you thinking survey data or better using the data that we kind of collect day to day from various agencies? What did you have in mind in terms of being able to, capture that information?
So at the moment, there's several issues with how we collect data at the moment, in specifically disability data in New Zealand. One of the biggest issues has been that we haven't had a disability survey since 2013. So we're working with, decade old data, and the data that we do have that's more recent is essentially being kind of cobbled together from whatever else we can find. One of the biggest problems we have is that the question set that we use is called the Washington Group short set. And the problem with the Washington Group short set is that the disability threshold is very high. So you have to, for context, I'm 28, I have autoimmune arthritis, I use a cane. Under the Washington short set, I don't count as disabled. I don't meet that threshold. So it basically means that we are undercounting the actual number of disabled people in New Zealand, which is an ongoing problem. I think with the the disability survey that's coming up this year, it will give us a much more representative overview of the state of disability data. But yeah, I think one of the key things for this bill is it needs to be adopted as part of whatever this bill ends up being. It needs to be tagged to disability data. Like it needs to be within the bill that we aren't going to go another 10 years without a disability survey. You know, it needs to be a priority that we are being counted and not just falling by the wayside, because it's slightly tricky.
Thank you, Phoebe. We're now at time. I really appreciate your submission, as I say, your notation as well. Go well with the rest of your day. We do need to unfortunately move on because we have leave to sit till 6 o'clock. So thank you.
No, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm pleased with whatever I'm very interested as to what the next iteration of this bill will be.
Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Thank you.
Ka kite.
Bye.
So we have Autism New Zealand by Zoom. Thank you. While we're waiting for Autism New Zealand to come in by Zoom, I'd just like to acknowledge our interpreters, Rosie and Stephanie, who have been doing a sterling job today, keeping up with some very fast-paced submitters. So thank you. Dane, welcome. Thank you so much for appearing by Zoom and for the long wait. I recognise we're running a little short of time. Look, would you like a descriptor of those of us who are in the room and those on Zoom?
Yeah, I guess that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll start with me. I'm Angie Warren Clark. I'm in a dark coloured but with floral. It's always hard to describe this flowers on my outfit. I have long blonde hair, glasses, and bad posture. This chair is killing me. Thank you.
Kia ora, I'm Anahila. I'm a Labourist MP based in Papakura. I'm wearing black. I have an afro and I'm wearing shell necklace and a pounamu.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, I'm Liz Craig, a Labourist MP based in Invercargill, and I've got a blue floral dress on and blonde curly hair.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, my name's Emily Henderson. I'm the Labour MP for Whakatane. I'm Pākehā. I have short grey blonde hair and I'm wearing a purple and cream floral dress and big glasses.
Talofa, my name is Teresa Ngui. I'm the Labour MP for the Ōtaki electorate. I am Scottish Samoan, so I have brown skin, long brown hair, and I'm wearing a mustard dress.
Kia ora, Dane. It's Jan Logie here from the Green Party. We've met, but I've currently got short, spiky blonde hair just for a change. Nice to see you.
Hi, Jan. Nice to see you.
And I'm Karen Chua, List MP for ACT based in Upper Harbour. I'm wearing a pink jacket with a light floral top. I have long brown hair and I'm Māori European.
And we have one member by Zoom.
Good afternoon, Dane. My name is Maureen Pugh. I'm Nationals List MP based in West Coast Tasman. Today I've got a bright orange top, short dark hair and glasses.
Kia ora.
So we're in your hands, Zane.
I'll start as well. I'm Dane Dugan, Chief Executive Autism New Zealand. I have a bald head. It was by choice when I first shaved it, but I doubt I could grow back now. And a relatively unkept beard because I can't grow hair on my head. And I'm also a Poihaere male in my 40s. So thank you for having me first of all. And as Chief Executive, I thought I'd give a quick rundown of who we are and what the submission from us represents. We interact with over 50,000 people a year, and that's a mix of both family whānau, autistic adults, professionals, government departments, etc., etc. So what we speak about is not coming from one person or a few people, it's coming from a wide range of individuals and our experiences over a long period of time. I've been in the role for 10 years, and these issues are things that have still been around for the last 10 years. So I'll just get straight into it. I can't imagine I'll take ages, so you might be able to catch up a little bit. And then if you have any questions for me, then please let me know, if that's okay. I assume you read our submission, so I've broken it down sort of into 4 key areas to begin with, and then 3 sort of supplementary areas as well. First, for us, is access to education is one of the critical factors, as always. Autistic children, some of you will know this, obviously, are 3 times more likely to be stood down or suspended from school than neurotypical children, which is a bit of a scary stat, I believe. And teachers do not have sufficient training to identify and work with autistic children. We have the government contract for teacher training, which we're very appreciative of, but even so, we have great demand for that, and we can't cater for the demand within our contracted numbers. So there's a real need for it. We would argue very strongly that a lot of that goes back to actually teacher training college as well. Oh, and I want to apologize first to the sign language interpreters. I speak really, really fast. So if it's too fast, please tell me to slow down and I will do my best. Can't promise anything, but I'll try to slow down. So there is far more demand than supply. It's far more demand than supply. We can only do so much within our government contract, and we believe there's a far greater need. But it does go back to teacher training college, and with those stats, obviously autism and other neurological conditions need a greater amount of attention, we believe, at teacher training college. Because right now, if you come to our course, it's by you volunteer to come, you don't have to come. So we feel that's a big point, and that obviously breaches the children's rights as well under the UNCRPD and also the Education and Training Act 2020, which I think we outlined in our application. Memberships of the committee. The committee should have at least 1 autistic person as a member. The written submission says autistic person or a parent or caregiver of an autistic person, but we believe there should be 1 autistic adult member and also 1 whānau member as well, just to cover the community. As at Autism New Zealand, the needs of the autistic adults and the needs of family whānau can be completely different. So to have that representation across both those areas, we feel is really, really important. The committee's function. So we don't think the currently drafted function of the committee go far enough. They appear to be limited to providing advice and recommendations, and we believe they should be empowered to set option and propose timeframes for implementation. So that would obviously be in consultation with the disabled community and whaikaha as well, clearly. And there should be greater accountability for those responsible for implementation to make sure that advice and recommendations are followed. So just providing the committee with more power, I guess, one of a better term, rather than just someone that provides us advice, that actually provides options and timeframes to have them implemented, we feel would be critical in making this successful and give the committee more teeth as well. The written submission is very focused on education and young children, which we get. But as I mentioned before, we also want to get across that awareness and acceptance of autistic people is important across the whole lifespan. So including adults, and I say this genuinely, there is currently insufficient support available for autistic children, absolutely, but for autistic adults, it's virtually non-existent. Today, this is slightly different, but I've been dealing with a brother of a 36-year-old young lady who has been trying to get diagnosed or looking for a diagnosis and currently can't even get either public or private diagnosis or even to be seen to be diagnosed. So chances are they're going to fly down to Wellington to our diagnosis clinic, and they're based in Auckland, which is just not acceptable. So there's got to be better pathways for support, but also for diagnosis, which is still the trigger for that support. I'll go into a few more points and then open for questions as well. As I said, I'll probably be a lot quicker than others. Raising awareness. So we also believe there's growing awareness of autism and neurodivergence in the community, which is good. And the committee, we believe, could shift from awareness to acceptance. So we do Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month in April, where you're about to be invited all to a breakfast in Parliament on the 6th of April. Just confirming the details of that, but we now focus our attention on on acceptance rather than awareness, and that is providing information and funding. And so this could happen by providing information and funding to Autism New Zealand or other like organisations around creating far more inclusive societies, which then creates far more acceptance over awareness now. Most people have heard of autism, I think, but not many people understand what that actually looks like. This is a big point as well, the definition of disability. So the definition of disability in the Human Rights Act 1993 excludes autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. And we recommend that an updated definition of disability includes these conditions, would be included in the bill, would be really beneficial. Actually critical, to be honest, to actually understand and actually start to provide better supports for our communities. And finally, from me, engagement, we would recommend that developing a plan that formalises consultation and engagement with organisations like Autism New Zealand and others, which have experience with the day-to-day struggles that disabled people face, is critical as well. So that engagement should be built into this somehow as well, in terms of ensuring that's done, and actually co-designed with the communities as well is important. So a lot of what we do now is co-designed with the community, and we've come a long way in my 10 years in this role. And I feel like that needs to be improved across the board. So it should be co-designed with both the autistic community and the wider autism community, along with family, whānau, professionals, etc. So it kind of summarises our submission, I think. I'm happy to take any questions now. Apologies if I spoke too fast. We did a great job interpreting that. So thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Dane. Great submission. You did speak fast, but I think you got your points across really well. We've got 2 questions, one from Karen, and then we'll go to Maureen. So Karen.
Yeah, so it sort of covers off some of your last points around hidden and invisible disabilities and what we class as a disability. And too often, I think we have a negative sort of connection with that word disability, and people don't really understand that there are invisible disabilities. And so do you feel that this bill addresses that at all, or it needs a complete new section put in there?
We feel like we feel like the definition either needs to change, or the bill needs to be, a complete new section put in. So we represent Autism New Zealand and the autistic community, but there's a massive overlap with the likes of ADHD, intellectual disabilities, etc. as well. And we feel like it's just not serviced well, and this bill we don't feel like addresses that really at all, to be honest, Karen. So we feel like there would either need to be a new section, or certainly a pretty big rewrite of certain areas of it to include it, because all too often we're just excluded from this because some people don't see neurodiverse people as having a disability because it is invisible. And
just a quick second question to that, sorry. It's just around learning disabilities and neurodiversity issues. We're constantly learning about new things coming up that we never knew before. And if we define the bill too much and categorize it too much, will we then risk having to keep going back to the bill and adding on these extra disabilities in the future, or is there a different way we could incorporate those disabilities?
Yeah, so I think I guess you're talking more of an umbrella term, probably, that could cover a lot of different areas, most likely. And I think if we would discuss that together, we could look at a way that would be worded where we wouldn't have to continually go back and change it, because I know that can be administratively difficult. So I think there is umbrella terms. The neurodiverse term seems to be quite accepted now as a wide-ranging term for hidden disabilities, for want of a better term. So I feel like, we could definitely, if that was the wish of the committee and we move down that path, then we'd be happy to be involved in looking how we word that in a way that would be as inclusive as it possibly could be. There is a risk, Karen, and probably likely the other sort of diagnoses will pop up down the track that we haven't thought of, and that would be just as valid, that needed to be included. But I think if we get it right now, we can encompass 90% of those moving forward.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And last question from Maureen.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dane. You mentioned in your submission around giving the committee a similar mandate to the Human Rights Commission. And I asked this question earlier in the day. Do you think if the Human Rights Commission was able to be changed in some way to give it the authority and the support it needed to manage the work that may come out of the Accessibility Committee? Because we've heard people talk about having a complaints process, or somewhere they can go to, for barriers. They can have a reporting mechanism where they can take it somewhere. Do you think the Human Rights Commission could be that vehicle?
I think the powers of the Human Rights Commission are quite limited from what I can understand, and they would have to be reframed and rejigged quite significantly. I think, Maureen, to be honest, I think that's the challenge. It's not necessary, from my perspective, probably from Autism New Zealand's perspective, it doesn't really matter what the name is or where it comes from, as long as it has the ability to do what's needed to do to support the community and be accessible. So it would need to be a pretty significant change, I would think, in the human rights area, I think, for that to work. But it could work. But I think it's just a matter of what is the key outcome, and how do we get to that outcome is probably more important in some ways than making sure the community is getting the support they need. Then my take on it is, as long as that's happening, I don't really mind how it happens. I guess.
Okay,
And that's
or who doesn't? Yeah.
And that's Autism New Zealand's sort of take on it, as long as it's a clear path and a clear understanding. I agree with the complaints process as well, because even in the schooling environment, that's quite difficult. So from our perspective, if the community is getting served and it's as accessible and inclusive as it can be, then we would be comfortable that the outcome or how that happens is not overly worrisome to me, as long as it happens. If that makes
Thank you. Yeah, it does make perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Dane. Thank you for your submission, but also thank you for the work that you do for a neurodiverse community to help them not feel so very alone and isolated. Really appreciate that work. It's so important.
Oh, it's a privilege to work for our community. I do want to add that now. It's an amazing community to work for, and it's different every day, and the things we do to try to help, because our people are primarily very, very capable of doing it themselves. Absolutely. So we just have to provide them a little bit of support to get to where they need to be, and that's, I think, how society needs to look at it as well. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for that, and we will no doubt see you another time with that magnificent beard of yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll probably keep it, so you probably will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for your time.
Ka kite. We're coming now to People First New Zealand by Zoom and in person. Do we have anyone to come in person?
No, one in person.
Just Zoom? Thank you. We're getting some wonderful submissions. We are. Submissions. Oh, Ronnie's.
Right, we've got one.
Hello, Ronnie. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Look, thank you for waiting. We have Pip as well. Okay, we have a couple of people by Zoom. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, People First New Zealand is name of your organisation. Thank you so much for your patience waiting to speak with us. We have 15 minutes with you. If you'd like to leave some time for questions, please do so. Would you like a descriptor of those of us who are in the room?
No. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie and Pip. We're in your hands.
Okay.
Do we need to introduce? Shall I just introduce myself first, Ronnie, and then you can start? Yep. So I'm Pip Townsend. I'm the Communications Manager at People First New Zealand, and I'm here to support Ronnie as he gives you our submission. So hi.
Hi, thank you. We're
Ronnie.
in your hands, Ronnie.
Off you go, Ronnie.
Tēnā katoa. Good afternoon. My name is Ronnie Fioni. I'm the National Chairperson of People First New Zealand and President of the Northern Region. I'm a member of the tracking group, local group. People First is New Zealand only DPO or disabled people organisation for people with learning disability. We run by and for people with learning disability. We use the term learning disability instead of intellectual disability, as we think is more respectful. Our mission to empower and assist people to be strong and value individuals in New Zealand. We are a member of the DPO Coalition. We work on shared goals with other DPOs. I am pleased to be talking to you today on behalf of People First New Zealand members about the accessibility bill. We feel it is important for you to know that people with learning disability have accessibility to needs too. We yet we often are often left out of discussion and decision about accessibility issues. Because people think we don't. I am here to say we do. At People New Zealand, we have 41 local groups in the 6 regions. In the local groups, we have meetings where members learn about their rights, how to speak up for themselves. We speak up about the issues that we are important to us because we want to have the same rights as all New Zealanders. Like housing, transport, healthcare, disability support, education. We provide advice based on our lived experience and have roles in advisory groups in local council, the community groups, government and businesses. All our work is putting in place the rights of in the UNCRPD, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. We have a service to put important information into easy read. Easy read is a format more accessible for people with learning disability. Having information in a way we understand means we can make more decisions for ourselves. To assess, to have the same rights and opportunity as everyone else. This means we can have a good life on an equal basis as others. But accessibility for us about more information. One sample consultation we did with 30 of our members about how public buildings could be better for all people. The members said that they need clear signage, even floors, wider corridors, large lifts for wheelchairs. They also said that it's good to have helpful people with good customer service. And they asked for direction with colours, coding and guide. The members also learn about their life, learn skills and gain confidence. How to speak up in our courses. We acknowledge this and support this submission to call establish co-design, co-production process, disabled people organisation. We are speaking to you today. We want to make sure this bill and its admin includes accessibility of people with learning disability, as we do not want to left behind. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Mr. Sione. That was a really useful submission. you appeared to be reading from something, and it would be really good if you could share those details with us as well. So we put your words into the record as well. We have a question now from Karen Shaw for you, please.
Yeah, it's just a quick question, really. In the submission, I see there is a sentence that says we want to make sure that accessibility requirements for people with learning disabilities do not get missed. The bill as it is written, do you feel that it does cover people with learning disability, or is that missing from this bill?
I think it does, because my members say they get left behind, they missed out on things, and they just getting sick and tired of it. That's why that I think.
Yeah,
I can't speak for my members.
Yeah,
Appreciate your response there. We have actually come to the end of our questions, Mr. Zioni. Philippa, Pip, thanks for coming as well.
Okay.
A really useful submission, and also I just have to say I didn't know much about your organisation, so I want to thank you for telling us who you are, and I also appreciate the easy read resource example that you gave us. I thought that was very useful, because we've heard a lot about the easy read resources, but you actually gave us something to click on and have a look at. So thank you for that. Do appreciate it. Thank you so much. We're now at the end of time, so have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, members, we are now, our next submitter has withdrawn at last minute, so we have now come to the end of our session. So for those of you watching along today, thank you. We're going to now just quickly turn off the cameras and have a quick minute or two in private session. Thank you. Hopefully we'll be able